Okay, good evening, everybody. It's 6:30, so we'll proceed with the meeting. Good evening. I'm Councillor Paul Gittings. I chair the Strategic Environment Planning and Transport Committee. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's meeting, which councillors are required to attend in person following the expiry of the Coronavirus Act regulations, which permitted online meetings, although councillors can join online, but I believe that they are all here in person tonight in this committee. We'll be using equipment connecting the chamber into a Microsoft Teams meeting, and some of the officers involved in this evening will be joining remotely via Teams. There is a live stream available through Teams, and a recording of the meeting will be uploaded to the website afterwards. I'll also need to inform everyone present that this meeting will be recorded and broadcast live on the internet through Teams, and a recording of the meeting will then be uploaded and available for repeat on the council's website. So with that said, welcome everybody. Are there any declarations of interest? Nobody's. Move on to item 2, which is minutes of the meeting of the Traffic Management Subcommittee on the 14th of. Yes, sorry, and yes, the minutes of the last Sept actually first. Thank you, Andrew. Agreed. Do we agree those are correct record? Agreed. Yes, and then item 3, minutes of the meeting of the Traffic Subcommittee on the 14th of September. They're all noted, pages 17 and 28, and then minutes of other bodies, Joint Waste Disposal Board, the AWE Local Liaison Committee, and the Reading Climate Change Partnership. That's 2 meetings of that body, and that's 29 to 62. Are we all agreed there? That correct? Any matters arising? Don't seem to be indicating. Item 5 is petitions. We have not been received any petitions, so we move swiftly to item 6, which is questions from councillors and members of the public. And question 1 is from a member of the public, who's Hilary Smart, who I believe is here. So I'd like to come forward, Hilary. You can fire away with your question. You press the red button and hopefully.
Yep, that sounds. Can you hear me? Cool. From a Twitter exchange with Councillor Barnett Ward, I understand that the council used to believe it could not maintain cycle infrastructure that did not meet certain requirements, but now thinks it can. This is particularly in the context of the painted bike lanes on Peppard Road, which Councillor Barnett Ward was told were intentionally not repainted when the other road markings were redone. These are now almost invisible in places. After Councillor Lanzoni kindly raised the issue for me, recently the council have said they will be repainted soon. Are there any plans to conduct a systematic review of cycle path maintenance that was not undertaken whilst the council held the belief it could not do it? And then would it be possible to do this maintenance?
Okay, thank you for that question. I'm going to ask Councillor Page, the lead councillor for Climate Strategy and Transport, to make the response on my behalf. Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Ms Smart for her question. Within the borough, as is the case nationally, there is a range of facilities that are intended to support cycling on the carriageway. These extend from advisory cycle lanes, broken white lines, to mandatory lanes showing solid white lines, and then segregated lanes, including physical separators such as bollards. Each have different design and supporting infrastructure requirements. The government has recently released cycling infrastructure design guidance for local authorities with a clear and understandable and commendable emphasis on providing fully segregated cycle infrastructure. This is the preferred approach of the council, as they physically separate cyclists from other traffic and will significantly influence greater uptake of cycling. It's this approach that's been adopted for the delivery of the forthcoming schemes along Shinfield Road, which is actually being built out at the moment, and Castle Hill, Bath Road, for which the council has successfully bid for government funding. Segregated schemes require space to safely accommodate traffic and infrastructure. This isn't always available for every desirable application and often means costly adjustments to highway layout. They also require the implementation of segregation features such as raised curbing or bollards. Even where such schemes are feasible, they can be very costly, and while the council is committed to delivering such infrastructure across the borough, it will take time to secure the necessary funding. Until the delivery of the Active Travel Tranche 1 schemes, which were implemented with government emergency funding made available during the early stages of the COVID-19 pandemic, Reading had relatively few advisory cycle lanes. Advisory lanes have been used where there is insufficient carriageway width available to accommodate the minimum lane widths required for mandatory cycle lanes and vehicular traffic, as has been the case with Peppard Road. Whilst the council rightly considered the aforementioned government guidance, it also needed to be pragmatic, accepting that painted mandatory and particularly advisory lanes are not the gold standard schemes for which it has the ambition to deliver. They instead provide the foundations on which to build and provide cycle facilities that would otherwise not have existed. The council has a comprehensive highway inspection regime that includes lining. The advisory cycle lane markings on Peppard Road will be refreshed, as will other facilities that are seen to be faded. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Have you got a supplementary, Smart?
Yes, I think I've actually got the same question again, because I'm not sure that's totally addressed it. I do welcome the new scheme on Shinfield Road. I think it will make my husband's commute a lot easier. I have 2 small children and we don't run a car, so we can't choose to only go to the places that the good infrastructure goes to. So we do have to use some of the, as Councillor Paynes mentions, the advisory and the other mandatory painted lanes, which are not ideal but are better than nothing. And as I understand from the exchange I had with Adele, but the question is, will you conduct a systematic review of the maintenance that you did not do and do it?
As I say, there is an inspection regime and we will be looking to refresh those lines that you've requested. And if there are any others that you feel are overdue, I recognise that in some cases, and this applies to lining and signing of all road restrictions, not just advisory cycle lanes, there are some overdue for attention. And we will be looking to improve the delivery of the lining next year, and in our forthcoming capital programme we will be looking to acquire and invest in the necessary vehicle to enable the work to be done in-house rather than relying on external contractors to do that work. So the speed and efficiency with which we deliver relining and the improvements and faded linings will be greatly enhanced next year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Page, and thank you, Smart, for your questions. If you want to switch off your mic, that would. Thanks very much. Great. Okay, we move on to the councillor questions part of the agenda, and question number 1 is from Councillor McElroy to the Chair of the Strategic Environment Planning and Transport Committee, which is me, but I think Councillor Page is going to answer on my behalf. So over to you, Councillor McElroy.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate this opportunity. School streets. The School Street trial on Crescent Road has reportedly been very popular, with children at Alfred Sutton and Maiden Early saying they feel happier, relieved and safer. A shift away from car use for parents bringing their children to school has also been reported, with a significant number of children surveyed at the primary school changing car journeys for walking, scooting or cycling to school, and a reported 6% reduction in car journeys to Maiden Early. University of Reading measurements show a 40% reduction in nitrogen dioxide beside the Alfred Sutton Primary School compared with before and during the trial, suggesting that children are safer, that the air they are breathing is considerably cleaner. Could the lead councillor please update the committee on what the council is doing to get more schools to participate in this programme? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McElroy. Councillor Page.
I thank Councillor McElroy for his question. Since setting up our School Street programme, Reading Borough Council has facilitated the introduction of 4 school street schemes across the borough at Park Lane Primary, Wilson Primary, Thameside Primary and the most recent at Crescent Road, incorporating Alfred Sutton, Maiden Early and the UTC. With regard to the Crescent Road scheme, I'm delighted to report that since 7th November, this has now been extended to cover afternoon sessions as well. Full details were given in the Reading Borough Council press release issued on 24th October, which is available on the council website. School streets create a safer and healthier environment for everyone, including local residents, and the initiative contributes to the council's wider ambitions for encouraging more active travel, such as cycling and walking, and as a result support better physical and mental health, lower carbon generation and improved air quality. School streets in Reading are run by the schools, with volunteer marshals patrolling the closure points. The council has produced a set of guidance and information along with an application pack for schools to apply if they would like to introduce a school street scheme. It's important to note that not every school in Reading is appropriate for a school street. However, where they do apply, the council works with the school to produce traffic management plans, undertake road safety audits, run marshal training, and provide cones and safety equipment. The council also undertakes the legal work associated with introducing a traffic regulation order to enable the road to be shut at agreed and specified times. The council is keen to see more school street schemes introduced in Reading, and officers are happy to discuss initiatives with any interested schools. The council also employs an active travel officer in partnership with Sustrans, who is engaging with schools to promote active and sustainable travel, walking and cycling. This has mostly been through visiting schools to give assemblies and workshops on active travel, and as part of this interaction, the option to introduce a school street scheme is discussed. In addition, other initiatives are promoted to deliver sustainable and active travel, such as Bikeability Cycle training, the Mode Shift Stars National School Travel Planning Programme, and road safety education events. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Page. You've got a supplementary, Councillor McElroy.
No, not right now. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank.
Thank you, Chair. I'll spare an impression of Councillor Creswell. Question is on affordable housing. Can the committee be updated on the proportion of existing housing in Reading that is classed as affordable and the proportion of new build housing built in recent years that is classed as affordable? Thank you.
I'm going to invite Councillor Leng, the lead councillor for planning and assets, to make the response on my behalf. Councillor Leng.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor McElroy, for your question, and pass on my thanks to Councillor Cresswell. According to the ONS, on the 1st of April 2021, the proportion of existing homes that were classed as affordable homes was 16%. This is broken down into 9.6% owned by the local authority and 6.4% owned by another registered provider. In terms of new build housing, over the 5-year period between the 1st of April 2017 and the 31st of March 2022, 20.7% of new build homes were in the form of affordable housing. This is broken down into 2.8 local authority new build and 17.9% that were developed or passed to another registered provider. It should be noted that the proportion of new build housing that is affordable differs from the proportion of all new housing completions that are affordable, because it excludes conversions and changes of use. Between the 1st of April 2017 and the 31st of March 2022, 15.7% of all new dwellings were affordable. The main reason that this is lower than the figure for the new build is because so many conversions to residential are no longer subject to the need to apply for planning permission due to permitted development rights. The need to secure affordable housing for such schemes is a major element of the justification for the legal direction Article 4 that came into force yesterday, 15th of November, which ensures that conversions are required to apply for planning permission in many areas of Reading. The council has strong policies that seek to secure affordable housing from development sites, including a 30% on-site provision from sites of 10 or more dwellings. However, in circumstances where a developer can clearly demonstrate that compliance with these policies would not make the development would make the development unviable, national and local policy mean that a lower contribution can and will be accepted. Therefore, whilst the council will continue to maximise the contribution that all developments make towards affordable housing, there are a number of circumstances which must be taken into account for individual developments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Have you got a supplementary?
Yes, please. I'll try to be quick. Since January 2020, only 17 4-bed homes have been advertised to council tenants, despite there being over 300 families. This is obviously a big thing that I think everyone's worried about. I understand that the council's target for affordable housing used to be much higher. Is that true? And if so, is there a good reason that the council has abandoned these families in favour of developer profits?
Councillor Lang.
I mean, I don't believe the council's abandoned anybody. You know, we've got a 30% affordable housing target. You know, I would make the comment that the Greens often vote against developments on applications and campaign against developments, and we've just invested in £30 million into a major council house building project, and £12.8 million of that money came from off-site contributions from developments across the town. So that's my answer to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Okay. So we move on to councillor question number 3, which is again Councillor Cresswell, which Councillor McElroy is going to ask on his behalf, which is about renewable energy. So over to you, Councillor McElroy.
Thank you. Renewable energy. Neighbouring councils are facilitating the transition to renewable energy, working in partnership with providers such as Solar Together, for example. Has such a partnership been considered by Reading Borough Council, and is it viewed likely that a similar scheme will become available to Reading residents? Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to invite Councillor Page, the Council for Climate Strategy and Transport, to answer that question.
I thank Councillor Cresswell and McElroy for the question. Reading Borough Council installed solar panels on its council housing in 2014-15, and this project put solar panels on 457 houses and added to the total volume of solar photovoltaics on the council's buildings, including schools that have already installed solar panels. More recent projects include Reading Community Energy Society, who have raised public share funding to install solar on a number of community buildings. New projects on Reading's leisure centres, recently publicised a number of remaining schools, and at the council's depot site. In total, over 10,000 panels. In addition to the solar installation on public sector buildings, Reading has a community hydro scheme in the River Thames, and whilst situated just outside the borough boundary, the wind turbine at Green Park close to the Reading FC Stadium. Both schemes are iconic symbols of the town's appetite to deliver renewable energy generation as part of its response to climate change. Reading has a thriving sector for the supply of solar panels, and whilst the price of solar panels has significantly fallen, making them a very worthwhile investment, many householders are not able to afford the initial expense of installing a system. This has made the delivery of an equitable scheme very challenging. Whilst the council has not yet launched a publicly accessible scheme for bulk purchase of solar panels, Reading Climate Change Partnership has set out the launch of such a scheme in the 2020 to 2025 Climate Strategy Action Plan, scheduled for delivery in 2023. As such, and with the provision of recent government grants which allow low-income households to access measures such as solar panels, the council is currently considering the options for the provision of a scheme. One option being explored is to join the Berkshire Solar Together scheme. I will ensure colleagues and members of this committee are kept informed of progress.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Have you got a supplementary, Councillor McElroy?
Yes, sounds excellent. Is there any reason you're already aware of that would threaten the scheme becoming a reality? I'm not talking about like meteors and stuff like that.
Councillor Page.
I generally don't know how things are progressing at the moment. Peter Moore behind me is the person to address that question to. He's obviously heard it, and he will be the person I will ensure will keep us informed of progress. But with goodwill on all sides, I would hope that we could see something like that materialising in the near future.
Thank you, Councillor Page. That concludes the members of the public and councillor questions section of the agenda. So we move on to item 7, which is decision book references. There are none. And item 8 is the Street Works Permit Scheme. I'm going to ask Mr. Sheen to come up to introduce this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. I'm Sam Sheen, the Highways and Traffic Services Manager. The report before you tonight, before the committee tonight, is to update the committee on the proposal and requirement to enter into a Street Works permit scheme and to seek approval to tender and dedicate authority for that. The council is required to transition from the current street manager system to a Street Works permit system, which manages all activity on the public highway, including our own work. The Street Works permit scheme is seen as a much more efficient tool, and there will be an initial capital outlay for us to invest into, after which we're able to cover all the running costs of the scheme. We'll be able to bring additional staff in to run the scheme, but that staff will be able to monitor the progress on site, they encourage working together by the utility companies and the council, reduce congestion on the network, reduce carbon footprint, and have a much more improved management of activities on the highway. So I'd ask the committee to recommend the recommendation in section 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sheen. Councillor Page, you indicated.
Chair, can I commend this to the committee? Clearly, one of the things that is aggravating to us and our local residents is the phenomenon of overrunning street works or badly managed street works. Any system, and this one does, that offers improved coordination and also sanctions is to be welcomed. We have had recent examples of companies that engage with the existing process better and some worse. And Sam Sheen and his colleagues have first-hand experience on a weekly basis. This is not a magic bullet, because it doesn't, at the end of the day, impose good practice. It finds bad practice, and there's a number of local authorities that have already introduced this scheme have discovered it is still reliant on good management within the utilities and the undertakings, and that isn't always present. But the regime has certainly improved the delivery of works in those areas that have introduced it. It will not be, as I emphasise, a silver or magic bullet. Reading has a very ageing infrastructure for gas, electricity, water, sewerage, and there will be a constant need for programmed works, and there will also be, of course, the emergency works. So that inconvenience will continue, but the intention is to minimise the inconvenience to the general public. And as the report makes clear on page 66, the intention is to reduce delay, reduce congestion, and improve the flow along those key routes, and particularly public transport, as well as essential deliveries, are ones that have been significantly inconvenienced in Reading, and therefore this scheme offers hopefully a way of reducing but not eliminating that inconvenience to the public.
Indeed, let's hope that is the case, Councillor Page. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I think this sounds really, really positive. Great step forward. I see from item 4.3 that we're amongst one of the last local authorities to transition to this new system. I'm just wondering if we can use that as an opportunity to our benefit to learn from other councils across the country and what pitfalls they have fell into, no pun intended with potholes and things, but so we can avoid those when we implement it as well. Because one of the things I get most from residents is, especially in the west side of Reading, is they get very frustrated when you've got Bath Road, Oxford Road and Tilehurst Road have all got roadworks on it, and they get stuck whichever way they go, and there's no other way around. So, and I know some other councillors from the west side of Reading will also chime with that. So if we can try and learn from other councils' implementations, that'd be brilliant.
Mr. Sheen, we've got something to...
Yep, thank you, and that's a really valid point. Yes, we've already having discussions with councils on how they implemented it, and also when we go to our consultant that we will tender for, it'll be a consultancy that has vast experience in it. So yes, with lessons learned. Just on your point on the roadworks, there's a lot going on. Bringing super fast broadband and 4G and 5G technology to Reading is essential for growth, as is our own road resurfacing programs and all the other developments going on. There is when the team are managing and programming works, we program as much as we can possibly allow on the network. But as you're fully aware, there's been a lot of emergencies. Drought has caused an immense pressure on our underneath the road. We've got a lot of heave in the roads that have clay underneath them, and the old infrastructure for water mains, etc., are failing. So when we agreed for works on Bath Road, what we couldn't take, the system couldn't take, was the burst water main in Tylers Road and all those other networks, and we did get to a really bad position because there's no capacity left with all the work going on. So it is a problem, and we'll manage it as best we can. But there are sometimes, a water main burst on Shinfield Road with Elm Road, it causes absolute chaos when there's lots of other work going on. Plus, of course, we've got active travel plan and all those other good schemes, and ultimately we'll be in a very good place.
Let's hope, Mr. Sheen. Yes, no magic bullet, as Councillor Page said, but also it's interesting that the climate situation is obviously having an adverse effect on some of our aging infrastructure as well. So let's hope this can alleviate some of that. So we're asked, recommended actions 2.1 and 2.2, which is a granting approval and giving delegated authority. I beg your pardon, sorry.
So I just want to ask
Carnell.
Just a follow-up question. Obviously, Councillor Page referring to this doesn't encourage good behaviour but penalises bad behaviour. What happens if it's the council that is overrunning with works? Did the council get fined? How does that work?
Can we find ourselves, Mr. Sheen?
The Reading West train station overrun on Tilehurst Road would suggest otherwise.
We will be coming to that later in the agenda, actually.
Marvellous, thank you.
Yeah, but we'll come to that later in the agenda, don't we? Think. Yeah. But Mr. Sheen.
Yeah, thank you. All contractors on the public highway will have to adhere to the rules, and that will include the council.
We have to stick to the rules as well, Mr. Councillor Carnell.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep this brief, as it appears there is unanimity here. I too welcome the scheme. I'm sure I'm not the only one here who regularly hears complaints of why didn't they do the roadworks at the same time as them. So this hopefully will address that, and I look forward to it working very well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, I'll look around. Any more on this? No. Okay. So recommended action 2.1 and 2.2, which is granting approval and giving delegated authority. Are we all agreed? Unanimous. Okay, thanks. Agenda item 9 is Mr. Sheen's going to introduce this, the Bridges and Structural Term Consultancy Contract. Over to you, Councillor, Mr. Sheen.
Thank you, Chair. No problem. This is basically a technical report to cross the T and dot the I's. The council, as a local authority, we can join many frameworks around the country, and this report specifically is looking to join the SCAPE Perfect Circle. Benefits for us and also for my colleague Chris Maddox and the transport team is that we can access local consultancies that have local knowledge to this area at a good rate, and also low access fee charges. So it's a cheaper option for us, but we get some really good local knowledge and experience into Reading. Sorry, if you just bear with me, I just lost my train of thought for a second. Agreed. I do apologise. So ultimately, it benefits the council, and it's an interim measure. As already said, it's an interim measure. Both Chris and I have now got procurement officers, category managers in our teams, which will allow us to start looking towards a joint contract, go out in the future for our own contract, rather than joining other frameworks, and also having the facility that other councils can join our framework and pay us their access fee. So it is something we're working on, and we think it will take 18 months to 2 years to get to there. So this is an interim measure in the meantime. I do apologise for losing my train of thought.
No problem. It's okay. Anybody want to speak to this? Seems a good explanation by Mr. Sheen. The recommended actions are 2.1 and 2.2, which is granting approval and granting delegated authority, respectively. We all agreed? Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks, Mr. Sheen. Okay, we move on to item 10, which is the annual report on the Reading Climate Emergency Strategy and the RBC corporate greenhouse gas emissions. And so Peter Moore has come and present this. Over to you, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, Chairman. So this report presents two annual updates on our progress in implementing two of the key strategic pillars in our response to the climate emergency. And although they're both related, they are different in terms of their ownership and scale. And there's a lot of potentially confusing data in these reports I've discovered. So I'll try and sort of just give you the headlines to keep it really simple. So Appendix 1 is the annual report on the Reading Climate Emergency Strategy, which is owned by the Reading Climate Change Partnership, of which the Council is a member. We also host the partnership, but we don't control it. We're one of a number of people around the table. That report describes activity across the whole of Reading by a range of partners, not just us, and it gives us our headline measure of progress towards the overall target of net zero by 2030, which we set in the climate emergency declaration. We measure that according to a national data set provided by BEIS. And by that metric, we've seen Reading's carbon footprint fall by 55% since 2005, which is the fourth largest reduction out of 370 odd UK local authorities. That data relates to 2020 because there's a bit of a lag in the data collection exercise. It's a big exercise. So we're going to have to wait till next year to see what the sort of impact of coming out of pandemic restrictions was, because globally we think emissions have bounced back to higher than they were pre-pandemic, but we don't yet know what that picture is for Reading, so that'll be an important result for us to look at next year. Beneath that headline, we've got some really positive case studies from a range of partners described in the report, which I'd encourage you to have a look at and which we're promoting through our associated media work. So that's the sort of whole of Reading picture. Appendix 2, much smaller pie, is the council's own corporate emissions, so that's from our buildings and fleet principally. Our headline measure of progress there is how are we doing against our target to achieve an 85% cut in our corporate emissions by 2025 en route to net zero by 2030. And the data for our latest year, which is 21-22, is that we've reduced our emissions by 71.3% since our baseline year of 2008-9. So that's good. This time last year, I was warning we might see a bounce back in emissions because this data reflects, we switched everything off in 2020-21. We turned it back on in 21-22, and we were concerned that might show up in these figures. That you can see it below the sort of waterline, but it hasn't sort of stopped our headline progress towards that target, and we remain on track for 85% cut by 2025, which is good news. And for context, Appendix 1, the borough footprint is 450,000 tonnes of carbon. The council's is just under 6,000. So you can see where we sit in terms of scale, but it's a really important 6,000 tonnes because of our role in leading by example. So lots to be positive about, but we absolutely try to be positive in these gloomy times, but at the same time, absolutely no room for complacency, and we're very clear-eyed about the scale of the challenge that lies ahead, hence part 3 of the recommendation, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Councillor Page is indicated.
Chair, thank you, Peter, for his introduction. The first point he touched on, and that's the Reading Climate Change Partnership, which is now a very mature organisation, one of the longest established in the UK, and I would commend the annual report to colleagues. It's important to emphasise that this is a partnership. This is not a delivery document, albeit in great detail, that is one solely for the council to deliver. It relies on work by organisations large and small. Some have signed up, others have still to be more fully engaged with that process. But we as an authority, I think, can be proud of the example that we have set, and that's reflected in the report and also in the recognition and validation by external organisations. I'd like to place on record my thanks and that of the authority to the work that is being done by the University of Reading, an internationally recognised organisation in leading work and research on the impact of climate change. Just to remind colleagues that the famous stripes, which are now used across the world, were developed at Reading University. Reading Buses has them on. We've now got Reading Football Club using them, and others as well. And they're an important campaigning tool that emphasises the threat posed by climate change. And I just wanted to reference the final bullet point on page 81, where we've got in the middle of page 81, it refers to the addition of Reading to the Carbon Disclosure Project's list last year, when we were ranked with 11 other UK cities and 95 worldwide. I'm going to break an embargo by about 12 hours to say we'll be putting out a press release in the morning that says that Reading, announces that Reading has again achieved that A-list accolade, and we are one of now 19 authorities in the UK and 123 worldwide that are identified as climate action leaders, and that is no mean achievement and reflects well on the council and also the town as well. And I'd like to thank Peter Moore and all his colleagues and those officers that have played their part in delivering yet another very impressive performance by the council at a time of great financial stringency. We're going to hear more tomorrow about the extent to which local government will be clobbered and the extent to which the government may well row back on commitments that it has made to invest in renewable energy and other measures to combat climate change. I hope they don't, but we will see tomorrow, and some of us will be watching very closely what the announcements made by the Chancellor. So, Chair, I would commend this report and the partnership working to the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Page. Councillor Hornsby-Smith, indicating.
Thank you, Chair. I think the key thing that I'd like to say about this is that it's incredibly detailed. It goes into all kinds of things that I couldn't possibly have thought of in terms of tackling the different elements of climate change and working it through. And I think Councillor Page alluded to the fact that we've established a long-term partnership. It's a long-established partnership about climate change here in Reading, because that is exactly what we as a local authority, as councillors, believed was important. The only way to deal with climate change locally is to work in partnership, and the fruits of that can now be seen here. And it's evidence that the sort of reduction figures that other people have mentioned, the 71% loss of corporate carbon footprint from 2008, the fact that we're 4th in the country for energy reduction is great. And actually that we're voted the 3rd most cycle-friendly city, and that we're in the country, town in the country, if you like. We're an award-winning council, and this is something that we should take a tremendous pride over. And the fact that our bus service is used as an exemplar in case studies and things like that. So this is genuinely a really good news story, and I think it's to the credit of the partnership and the officers and all of the participants that we've got such a detailed, such an authoritative report here. I do have a couple of questions that I'd like to ask, and I realise that they're to do with the appendix, which is, you know, as you mentioned, Mr. Moore, is we're a part owner of it. But so I'd be quite happy with written answers if it's easier that way, because it's about the appendix. So on page 129, I think it's W4, it talks about the standard is about water quality. And I wondered, we often hear stories about discharges upstream on the River Thames, and you know, the impact on the water quality in places like Oxford. I wondered what the impact of that is here, because, you know, I think that particular standard is amber. I wondered if we are impacted by that discharge higher up the river. Separately, on page 140, H3 talks about cooling places, and it mentions the fact that the RBH has established a cooling place. And I wondered if there are other cooling places that are being planned or are available. And finally, on page 156, it talks about the local electricity generation and the local company or group of people that are doing this, and the figure of 1,541,218 kilowatts of electricity being generated by that. That sounds very impressive, but I wondered if I could possibly have the context of how that it fits with this sort of general level of electricity that you'd expect a town to produce. So I'm not expecting an answer now, because I've just hit you with that, and it's a partnership document. But if you can throw any light on those, that would be great. Yeah. But just overall, just to conclude, this is a fantastic report. It's really full of really useful information and lots of progress being made, and it's to all of the people who are engaged in this credit that we've got this level of detail and this level of progress. So thank you.
So, Mr. Moore, I don't know if you're able to answer those quite detailed questions, but if you either by email or in public now.
Yeah, I can give a couple of immediate reactions because they're all good points, and thank you for those comments, Councillor. Water quality. The rating here is a comment on the action rather than on water quality per se. I think we realise that we've already started thinking about the review of this strategy and what comes for the period 25-2030. And one of the gaps we've identified already is we've got this massive great headline measure and these lots of itty-bitty actions. There's something in the middle about the big measures of environmental progress which speak to climate, like recycling figures and water quality data, and we need to sort of bring that in and improve that next time. So watch this space for a bit more on that in the future. Cooling places, I'd probably say that the most important cooling spaces that the council can influence and has control over would be our green spaces, parks, and the tree planting programme that we've got will be probably the single biggest difference we can make in that area without generating massive energy costs by banging in great big air conditioners everywhere, which is obviously slightly counter to what we're trying to achieve on the emissions reduction side. So that's probably something to keep an eye on, and the nature theme within the strategy, where we've got a really important part to play. And I will have to get back to you on the local electricity data point. I don't have those figures at the top of my head.
Well, thank you, Mr. Moore. I mean, obviously the cooling effect of trees is really impressive, actually, and just with the summer heat wave. And we don't want to go down the route of the Qatar World Cup, where there's a lot of air conditioning, as I understand it, in stadiums, which is not a good example. But Councillor McElroy.
Thank you, Chair. First, Peter, just to recognise that we discussed a bunch of transparency improvements in the reporting last year, and I can see clear evidence of some of that stuff coming into place around how we can perversely improve our footprint by disposing of buildings with a high footprint, or getting the better balance in communication about how far the council has come. So as opposed to how far we still have to go. So just credit where credit is due on that. Today, we've obviously heard a lot about the good action that has been taken. However, I do have to repeat one of my comments from last year, which focuses on the bad stuff that I guess isn't reported here. And my point really is that the bar that BEIS has set, and that the corporate emissions count as emissions within the scope of influence of local authorities is, in my opinion, way too low. I think that the council should be looking to flex its indirect influence more and include that in its figures of how far we've got. And for example, a range of things that the council would have at least indirect influence on, if not direct influence. The air is foul in and around the IDR. There is still a lot of cars when cyclists living on the south side of Reading need to risk their lives cycling through taxi ranks and bus exchanges just to get to the station. Investment of significant sums of money in fossil fuel loving Qatar, raised bus fares, building on green spaces, whether it's a car park for a privatised leisure centre, or the horrors in Emma Green, where developers are even allowed to make spurious technical claims to rule out ground source heat pumps before it even gets to the right stage of the planning process. And I guess particularly egregiously, the children living in mouldy, uninsulated council houses. This council has one allocated person on the Winter Watch scheme, while money earmarked for this sort of work goes unspent. I see in the report 28 homes were retrofitted in phase 1 of the Green Home Grant. 28. Is that really acting as if this is an emergency? I think everyone can make up their own mind with that context as to whether the job is indeed actually 55% done. So I guess, given these realities that I've outlined, and a lack of aspiration or urgency that they indicate, that much more of the more difficult things the council has at least a not insignificant indirect influence upon are conveniently out of scope. I unfortunately still have to say that I believe that a lot of this is greenwashing, which is a shame, because this behaviour simultaneously diminishes the efforts of those champions that we've heard of today, whilst giving a free pass to those parasites who are not taking action. I can't believe it's been a whole year since my last rant on this agenda item, and at this rate we are going to be burnt to a crisp with our ashes washed away in a flood long before we hit that zero carbon target. This is not an emergency response, in my opinion.
Okay, I don't know, Mr. Moore, you want to respond to some of those points, or other councillors as well? They want to be capable. I know, Mr. Moore, just.
I'll stick to the data points.
Yes, stick to the data point, which are non-blue.
Yeah, the base data set, it has its limitations. We acknowledge that in the report. It's a measure of production emissions rather than consumption emissions, which is a much bigger number. It is, however, the best and most comparable data set we've got access to at the moment. And there's a whole process going on, a conversation between local and national government via something called the Local Net Zero Forum, which government recently set up, to see whether we can find a better way and a more consistent way of measuring and reporting on local authority emissions consistently. The 28 houses you refer to under that one phase of that one funding programme, bit of a red herring. I mean, it is what it is. It was a small programme and it delivered that much of an improvement, but not to be underestimated. But that's as nothing compared to the retrofitting that goes in on day in, day out throughout the council's housing stock, just as a result of our investment programme, which is probably business for H&L committee rather than here, or that's where it's probably more discussed in more detail. So I wouldn't be too misled by that small number. That's one project that we got some government funding for.
Councillor Lang.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying some of those points, Mr. Moore. Mine's just to come back at retrofitting of our council stock. You know, we've done a great job, and you know, but the one that really winds me up a little bit is the Winter Watch. The Greens never did get the ethos of the Winter Watch and what it's all about. It's about helping with debt management, debt advice. You know, I remember a comment from a Green councillor before. It's about draft excluders on front doors. You know, let's not go that low like we always do. Attacking Winter Watch is money well spent. It helps vulnerable people, particularly in the south, in south of Reading, where one resident said to me, "Oh, they're like it's like the man off the telly that comes around and helps you sort out your bills and that." So this is a really, really important thing that the council does. And I know they wanted to do some cheap political point scoring at a previous by adding an amendment to something at the budget or something about spending money on an extra officer, you know, to help insulate houses for rich landlords, as far as I was concerned. So anyway, I've said too much, so I shall back away. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Yeah, question on the appendices, which lists all the different actions and gives a traffic light system on. Are the rows listed in terms of priority, or are they listed in some other sort of way? They're not.
No, they're as they were drafted at the time. We had a bit of criticism, fair criticism, I think, this time last year. We totted them up and sort of weighed them in buckets, but actually, you know, they're not all the same. So some are really quite significant, some are quite minor.
Yeah,
so
that leads me to the next point. What might be quite useful, because obviously there's a number of items in red, but it would be good to know the context of whether those are as an equal priority to the other rows, which are in green or amber, to understand about is that as a red warning sign and we should really be concerned about it, or because it's actually quite a low priority, it's not really a concern. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, we almost introduced blue this year for the things which have been overtaken by events, and there's quite a few of those. They ended up being red. So this probably looks redder than it ought to. And I think that's a point again for why we're starting that review process next year and getting a long run up to that, is to address some of those weaknesses we've identified in this format. So it's an indicator rather than
yeah. I mean, I see things like the hydrogen fuel cell, and I'm like, that's been coming for about 40 years, and I don't think it's going to come anytime soon. So
yeah, we're quite relaxed about that one being red because it ain't going to happen anytime
right.
soon.
So I think just really incredibly useful. Hopefully that'll be taken consideration when it's reviewed into some sort of showing actual priority and importance. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any more? Yes, of course, Councillor Hornby.
I just wanted to congratulate the council on ensuring that our brand new leisure centre, with its 100 station gym, with its child's play area, and with its 6-lane 25-metre swimming pool in East Reading, which was much needed, and had the support finally, after a lot of toing and froing, of the Green Party. I'm just a little bit disturbed to find that now it seems that they're not responding positively to the fact that we've put solar panels on it, or that we've got a ground heating system, and that we've really made sure that it is green. Are they actually saying, really, that after all of this, and after their last-minute vote in favour of the thing, so that they could claim credit for it, are they really saying that now they don't support that new fantastic facility, which is about to open next month?
Thank you. Councillor McElroy, yeah, absolutely.
I think my point was that the report cherry picks positive stories over negative stories, as we're seeing in the extra examples being given now.
Okay. Councillor Page.
Councillor McElroy's drivel that he came out with reminds me of speeches I used to hear in Reading Students' Union when we had the hard left in control. It was what was called the impossibilist agenda. It didn't matter what was delivered, it was always never good enough. We could be scoring 98% on all the matrices you like, we'd be slagged off because of that 2%. And of course, that's always the easy bit when you're in opposition without any hope of local control. I'm looking at the list independently assessed of those authorities that have been given the designation under the Carbon Disclosure Project assessment as climate action leaders. Not one of those authorities is a Green Council. They don't feature on that. Where they have an opportunity to perform well, they don't. Because of course, then you have to have difficult choices. You Labour, in your lovely little world of opposition, constantly opposing what we do, and yet where the Greens are in control or in the largest single party, they do not feature on this list. It's a list overwhelmingly of Labour councils, but there are Lib Dem and Conservative councils there, not a single Green council. So actions speak louder than words. Your words and rhetoric scripted by somebody else, because that drivel I cannot believe came from your mind, but I can imagine who scripted it for you. So perhaps look in your own backyard first before you try lecturing anybody else.
Councillor Page, any more indicate? Okay. For us to note 2.1 with 1 and 0.2, and then 0.3, as Mr. Moore indicated, the need for the council and other partners to maintain efforts to meet the very challenging target of a net zero carbon Reading and a net zero carbon council by 2030. And indeed, it is a very challenging target. And I think this report demonstrates the really big efforts that are being made by the Reading Climate Change Partnership and the council itself, notwithstanding the fact there is more work to do. I think everybody recognises that, both within Reading and also globally. And we've got the COP27 at the moment with Alok Sharma handing over the presidency there, representing Britain. And obviously, you know, some of these items require global action as well as local action. But I think this report does indicate that locally we are making a difference. But we do, you know, there's more to be done, as Mr. Moore has acknowledged. So I'm going to ask the committee to note that report and also the need for the council to maintain efforts. Are we all agreed? Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Moore. Move on to agenda item 11, which is the introduction of civil enforcement of moving traffic contraventions. And this is going to be presented by Helen Taverner, who is online on the screen to my right. So over to you, Helen, some introductory comments.
Thank you. Can I just check that you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. So the introduction of moving traffic enforcement to Reading Borough Council. We've been working on this since the government gave the green light for local authorities outside of London to enact Part 6 of the Traffic Management Act 2004. Those of us that have worked in traffic and parking for long enough have been waiting for this since 2004. We initially went out with a public consultation as per the requirement of the DFT. This listed what we intended to do, where we intended to do it, and for what purpose. The report outlines the responses that we had to that, and largely it can be seen that the support was around 50% throughout overall and all of the locations. The biggest written comments we received were in general support of the type of control we're looking to introduce. 16% of our respondents were concerned it was about raising money, and 9% were concerned that implementing this wouldn't be good use of council funds. The rest of the comments were all in much smaller percentages and covered such things such as the need to reline and remark, resign some of the areas, which of course we will be doing before we do any type of enforcement. We've been working on the project since the summer. We are having to procure new cameras to enforce. We're, as I say, looking at the signing, lining, make sure that we've got those correct data protection impact assessments for the cameras. Further publicity will go out. So we are intending to have our first site live before the end of 2022, with the remaining locations introduced before April 23. There are 15 locations. So they will be rolled out slowly. We won't be going out one day and enacting all 15 locations. Just to be clear, at each site, there is a mandatory 6-month warning notice period so that people do get a chance to understand what we're doing and to correct any behaviour that maybe they didn't understand wasn't expected of them. So the PCNs are sent out in exactly the same way as our bus lane enforcement. It's the same process, it's just a different restriction. Of course, we will continue to do this. This ties in nicely actually with the climate emergency. It improves our traffic flow. It ties in with many of the other priorities that the council have got, not least to improve the efficiency of our bus service and making sure that they can run smoothly.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, Councillor Page, you've indicated.
Yeah, can I thank Helen for that? A number of us had the pleasure of meeting Helen in person at last week's traffic management subcommittee. So can I thank her for the work that she and colleagues are doing on this important enforcement. It's important to emphasise that the intention is to deliver smoother flowing traffic that will not only benefit our bus services but also the local economy, and better flowing traffic and less congestion at certain points that regularly suffer it because of the blocking of yellow box junctions. But it's important to emphasise that the first 15 sites are the first 15 sites. We will be looking at other locations. Moving traffic offences extend much wider than just blocking yellow box junctions. They are driving down one-way streets the wrong way. They are making left or right turnings where those movements may be banned. Often those movements are undertaken at high speed and can threaten pedestrians and cyclists as well as other road users. So the enforcement of moving traffic offences will be extended to other areas of the borough, and I would invite colleagues who do receive complaints from local residents to ensure that Helen and colleagues are notified of them. So we already have a long list for future sites, but it is possible that other areas have not been identified. So please let Helen have that information. And the final point to emphasise is the amnesty period referenced in paragraph 4.13 on page 165. Initially, with each new site, the first offence committed by a motorist will incur just a letter saying that this would otherwise have been a penalty ticket. Next time it will be a penalty ticket, but this is a polite warning that cameras now operate and you would have received a ticket. Obviously, if within that 6-month period you commit the same infringement, you will then receive a penalty charge notice, and the process after that kicks in. And other than that, Chair, I would commend the report to colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Page. Councillor Mackerel indicated first.
Yeah, thanks officers for all the work here. Broadly, this is very good. I've got a question, I guess. Back in April, officers told Green councillors that it would be possible to introduce these to support school streets, of course, subject to all the usual consultation, suitable camera locations, etc. Now that the scheme is progressing, can officers confirm that this could in future be used for school streets, road closures, and what would need to happen to start to look at that? Like, I know this appears difficult, as school streets will need to be marshalled for child safety, and that's a fair concern. But in London, there are school streets closures only run by camera fines and then marshalled occasionally and at random to keep drivers away. These are apparently working and report no additional safety incidents. So just to repeat, my question was, what would need to happen for us to start looking at using this for school streets? Thank you.
I think the answer will be yes, but I'm going to call on Mr. Tanner for a more detailed response than that.
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. But we do need to be very careful. It's very clear in the regulations that have been set out that we cannot design this in at the beginning. We've got to prove that engineering and education has failed in a location before we can enforce by camera. So it is a yes, but it's just something that we have to make sure we're doing once we've tried everything else, essentially.
Thanks for that. Councillor Moore, you indicated, and then after.
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very reasonable first step. I think it's a good amount of sites, and as someone who lives on a one-way street, I look forward to further rollout in the future. The only sad part for me, and I think Councillor Page agreed with me, is I'm sad this doesn't allow, we're not yet allowed to police or enforce 20-mile-an-hour limits. We've not yet got that power, and hopefully there'll be some common sense in the coming years about that if this transfer of powers to local councils is deemed a success across the country. Thank you.
Indeed. Councillor Carnell.
Thank you, Chairman. We in the Party of Law and Order fully support this. I'm particularly pleased. One bugbear for me, and I'm sure many other people, is the number of yellow box infringements we see on a regular basis. So I'm delighted to see that. I can think of another location which needs some enforcement. I will be speaking with a ward councillor who represents that area very shortly. Thank you.
Okay, get your favourite yellow box junction into Stafford. But yeah, make sure that as a councillor you don't end up with an infringement for the Party of Law and Order. Because Councillor Hornsby-Smith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I too welcome this report. It's good news that we've got finally got these new powers. My personal one that I would look forward to making sure that this happens is the turning out of Eastern Avenue and into Eastern Avenue on Working Road. The number of times I raised this through the East Reading Safer Neighbourhoods Forum and got absolutely nowhere because it wasn't being enforced. I can't even count. But what I did at the time was I sat on the wall by that junction and I counted 11 infringements in 2 hours of people turning in or people turning out illegally. So this is good news. This is something that the council support and Labour supports, and I will support this. And I hope that that's one of the areas that now you know about that could receive some attention.
I knew we'd started something here, actually. I'm trying to think of one in Coley Ward now. Well, I suppose there are. Maybe on the list. Look, thanks. Yeah, I know. You think of one. I know. Right. Pedestrian crossing. Look. I think this is a really important piece of work. I mean, we are actually. This has gone to another committee, so we're here to note it. But thank you, Helen Taverner, for introducing the report and answering our questions. And I'm sure you made a note of some of those places that people. You're going to get a lot of these, actually, I think, as time moves on. But quite rightly so, though, because it's important.
Absolutely.
Yes, good. Okay, so are everybody happy to note the recommended under recommended? We noted it. Great. Okay, so we move on to agenda item 12. Alex is coming to introduce this. Is the Rights of Way Improvement Plan. It's a draft for public consultation. Over to you, Mr. Maddox.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, so the report provides an update on progress with developing our new Public Rights of Way Improvement Plan, or ROIP, as we affectionately call it. And obviously, you know, the Rights of Way network does provide an important part of our overall walking and cycling network in Reading, even if in terms of rights of way, we don't have as much as, say, some more rural authorities. It is still an important aspect. So we've prepared the draft strategy, which is provided at Appendix A, following the initial consultation that we undertook last summer. We had over 200 responses to that consultation, and some of the headline feedback is provided at paragraph 4.5 of the report. And we are seeking approval from this committee to take that draft strategy through a 12-week statutory consultation process, which is in line with government guidance, and then we will report back the findings from that consultation if approval is granted this evening. Thanks.
Mr. Any comments, questions? Councillor Page.
again, this is an important piece of work. Reading obviously doesn't have an extensive network of public rights of way because we're a small and constrained local authority in terms of area. But nonetheless, it is important for people to recognise that those rights of way need to be protected and kept open and made passable. We as a council obviously own some of the land, and we need to be assured as members that inspections take place regularly, and that those paths and those rights of way are kept fully accessible. We equally have a duty to ensure that privately owned land across which those rights of way extend are similarly maintained and accessible. And we have a network of local individuals who do report blockages and obstructions to the council, and I hope the publicity will ensure that others undertake that task, because we do need eyes and ears in the community. We can't be everywhere, and neither can our officers. And so this document sets out the inspection regime that we will be undertaking as a local authority, and gives, of course, a lot of detailed information about the assessments that have been made. There are further appendices still to come, and obviously the consultation, which will extend over 12 weeks, will enable people to feed back on the initial work that was done last year. But thanks to Chris, Lily and others in the department that have got us to this important point. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Page. Anybody else indicating? Councillor McElroy.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And thank you for all the work you've done on this bit, and also for answering my questions behind the scenes that saved me from asking some stupid questions here. Obviously, a lot of the map on page one, I don't know what you're laughing about. I think that map on page 190, a lot of the space between the rights of way is public highway. I understand from our emails that there are no current plans to convert any existing public highway into bridleway or footpath. I close them to cars other than for perhaps resident access. But as a spicy suggestion to put to the council and perhaps to different ward councillors, is there something here that we could be exploring to see if there are any parts of public highway that could be becoming better use for active travel rather than for cars, if that makes sense?
Mr. Marks, you want to sort of answer that or cover that if you can?
Yeah, I mean, as we say, we don't have any current plans specifically on public highway. I mean, most of the public highway is, fairly accessible by walking at the current time. Cycling is obviously something that we are looking at, and we're doing a number of schemes at the moment, and we would like to do more subject to funding. But yeah, I mean, as I say, we've got quite a long 12-week consultation process, which is dictated to by the government guidance. So we would welcome any suggestions and feedback as part of that process. The initial consultation, which we had to undertake prior to doing any work on the plan, did ask people for suggestions around new rights of way, and we did have a few back. They weren't on the public highway, as I recall, but obviously all of that feedback and any more feedback will be looked at as part of developing the plan.
Thank you. Somebody else indicating. So we've got to note the progress on developing the plan, but also more importantly to provide approval to undertake a 12-week statutory public consultation. Is everybody in agreement with that? Thanks very much, councillors. Okay, we can move swiftly on to agenda item 13, which is the strategic transport schemes update. Mr. Mallox, I think you'd probably say a few covering comments.
Yep, thanks very much. Yeah, so so this is the regular report to this committee, setting out progress against our major transport scheme programme. It's quite a long report, but in terms of a few highlights, so Reading Green Park Station, which has been on this report for a fair while now, construction works are substantially complete. Hopefully you had a chance to see the press release that we've issued recently, which has got some drone footage and some photos of the new station, which I think looks pretty impressive. We have now entered a period of testing and authorisation, which is being led by partners in the railway industry. That does, excuse me, take a little while. There's a number of processes to go through, but we will get there and we will open the station in the new year. That's Green Park, Reading West Station. So works are ongoing at both the Oxford Road and the Tylerhead Road entrances to provide long overdue significantly enhanced passenger facilities at this station. As referenced previously in the meeting, we have been notified by Great Western Railway, who are undertaking these works, that there have been delays at the Tilehurst Road entrance. Unfortunately, the significant rainfall recently hasn't helped. They've also uncovered some additional drainage complications, which they didn't know about until they had to dig the hole to put in the new facilities there. So we are working with them. Obviously, we do understand the impact it's having on traffic and buses on the Tilehurst Road. Their initial indication is that it's around a 3 to 4 week delay, unfortunately. So we would be looking at around mid-December now for those works to be complete. But obviously, anything they can do and we can do working with them to to fasten that would be good. And then in terms of some of the other schemes, so active travel, I think as well, as previously mentioned, Shinfield Road, the works on the active travel scheme have now commenced, starting at the university end and working up towards the local centre. So we're pleased with that. The next active travel scheme that we've received government grant funding for is on the Bath Road. So we're currently working on detailed designs for that scheme, following the public consultation we undertook earlier in the year, had some really good feedback on that. The concept designs for the scheme are provided at Appendix A, and we're seeking scheme and spend approval and approval to undertake the associated procurements to progress this scheme from the committee this evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Marks, and thanks for the update on the Reading West Station, which was raised actually by my ward colleague, Councillor Emberson. So thanks very much for that. Councillor Moore.
Thank you. On the Reading West Station, is it a responsibility of GWR to communicate out the delays and the timescales and put up new signage? Because it does still say where it is. It should be done 2 days ago, and people are saying, well, what's going on? Because obviously people are using Tilehurst Road is heavily used. And just wondering whose responsibility is it? And just a indulgent of my own, under the South Reading Mass Rapid Transport, can we have a tram, please? That'd be brilliant.
No.
Oh, it says in the future the scheme has the potential to become a tram, and I say let's have that. Sounds brilliant.
But I think can answer certainly the first bit's an easier answer, can Mr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So, I mean, ultimately, in terms of Reading West, it is the responsibility of GWR because it's their scheme. However, we are really invested in the scheme. It's going to be some great improvements for the travelling public for sustainable travel. So it is actually one of the first things we did raise with them when they informed us of this, is we do need to tell people about this. So we will work with them on that and get something out as soon as we possibly can. And then in terms of the South Reading MRT, then yeah, I mean, essentially funding for that scheme has come from external sources. We're doing what we can. It is in phases because of the level of funding available. However, we're always looking for kind of opportunities to secure additional external grant funding if there was the level available to put in, something a lot better, like a tram system. Obviously, it's something that we would definitely look at, but I'm not aware of any opportunities, for that level of funding at the current time.
I think after tomorrow's Treasury announcement, funding for those type of schemes may be somewhat limited, but we await with bated breath. I don't see anybody else indicating. So we're asked to note the progress on the delivery of the current programme, including the small delay, and to grant spend approval for active travel tranche 3, segregated cycle facilities and pedestrian enhancement on the Bath Road between the town centre and Berkeley Avenue, which as a ward councillor I fully support. So are we all in agreement with that? Right, okay. Which brings us on to the final item on the agenda, the Reading Bus Service Improvement Plan, BSIP update. Mr. Maddox.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so again, this is becoming a regular item to this committee. So the report sets out progress with developing the proposals for our Bus Service Improvement Plan, or BSIP as we're calling it in the office, following the indicative funding award of over £26 million from government, which is split into capital and revenue funding. We've been continuing to work closely with all local bus operators, obviously Reading Buses as the predominant operator, but also other operators who have services locally, and also Department for Transport officials to develop the programme of schemes as set out at paragraph 4.4 of the report. There's a full list there, but some of the schemes include a ticketing discount scheme, which we've been working closely with the operators on, and a range of new bus lanes and priority measures throughout the borough. And that does include actually further phases of the South Reading MRT scheme. So we're seeking a number of approvals from the committee this evening, as set out in section 2 of the report. This would enable us to progress with the full BSIP programme. However, it is important to note that at this stage, the grant funding has been awarded indicatively. Whilst we've had some really positive conversations with the department, we haven't actually received final confirmation of that grant funding at this moment in time. So any agreement for these recommendations this evening would be subject to government finally confirming that grant funding being received by the council. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Councillor Page, you indicated.
Thank you, Chair. This is an important item. Obviously, Reading was pleased. We were pleased to receive one of the largest bus service improvement plan allocations in the country per head of population, one of the largest allocations. Only about 30 authorities, highway authorities, got funding, and that obviously caused a lot of ill will amongst other authorities that had actually invested quite a bit of time in meeting very tight government deadlines. And paragraph 3.1 references October 2021, which was a government deadline that we had to meet in terms of publishing our BSIP, and at all stages we have met tight government deadlines to comply with the bidding. But of course, government is good at imposing deadlines on us and lousy at imposing deadlines on themselves. So the approvals that were promised earlier this year, and then by the summer, and then by the autumn, and now nearly winter, have yet to materialise. Of course, government chaos at a national level has contributed to that. Whilst we are keen to progress, we can't until we get that final sign-off. In the meantime, Chris Maddox and colleagues, supported by consultants and by the local bus industry, are all poised and ready to go. We've got the enhanced partnership referenced on page 239, all set up, multi-operator travel card, discounts, all poised to go. All should have gone on the 1st of April this year, but no, it has slipped. And the one thing that sticks in my craw is the patronising approach of central government that offers additional funds to local authorities to assist them, because we're felt not to have the ability in-house to manage this process. Well, I would say to the DFT, perhaps you might look at your own house as well, because the capacity clearly is somewhat constrained at national level. That's not in any way to begrudge the fact that we have been given this funding, but we want to get on with it. And yet the micromanagement that we still get from the department is testimony to the fact that this government cannot let go, will not let go. We approved a BSIP. We went into great detail. It was then crawled over by officials who validated it, and that was right. And yet still, they can't let go to give us that approval. And until the government really wakes up and devolves this sort of thing properly, we will see those frustrating delays. So we're all set to go. There's a whole raft of good initiatives which will hopefully build on the successful delivery of public transport in Reading, and the sooner we get the go ahead, the better.
Yeah. Anybody else indicating? Okay, well, there's a whole tranche of recommended actions from 2.1 to 2.5 with approvals and delegated authority. I'm not going to read them all out, but has the committee agreed on those recommended actions? Agreed. Okay, I think we all are, very much so. Okay, well, with that, I think we can conclude the meeting. Thank everybody for attending. Thank the officers for coming along, and bid you all good night and farewell.